Well, if you watch my video, you will have heard just a very brief overview of our church finances. And in this one, I want to give a sort of medium level overview of our church finances. If anyone would like to really get into the details, there's several ways you can do that. There is a little bit more detail in the annual report itself. We also publish our vestry minutes every single month, and those contain an up-to-date record of exactly where we are. The January vestry meeting minutes, of course, including all the year-end figures as well. And if at any time anyone ever really wants to look line by line, it is a principle of our church that we are open and honest in all of our financial dealings. And you're perfectly able to come and look at the budget report that the vestry sees each month. Whoever you are, you can just make an appointment to come and see us, and we'll be very happy to share that with you. So in summary, we finished last year rather well, and our plan for this year is to run a zero budget. On this slide, you can see a little bit more information about our church income. These figures are rounded for the purposes of this presentation, but very close to the actuals. For those of you that want to get the vestry report, you'll see that these figures are very close. So in 2020, our planned giving, that is people who tell us in advance what to expect, gave us a budget of $547,000. We always take, with a number like this, a little bit of a percentage off, recognizing that people move away or aren't always able to make their entire giving up to where they wanted it to be. Against that, you'll see actually that there was a substantial shortfall in planned giving. There, the actual number was $504,000. So the pandemic certainly had a really major effect. Whether that was individuals struggling financially or just the fruit of people simply not being here is difficult to say, but that is a substantial change. If you look at the line below, though, donation plate and other, this is people that give traceable sums of money or just cash in the plate, and but don't tell us in advance what to expect them to give. And you can see there that although we projected 122,000, we received considerably more than we expected. And we think this is the result of a couple of things. It's new people joining the church. Not only that, I think several people responded to our call to help make up any shortfall that might result from other members of the church struggling financially. With those two things together, our entire income was up considerably. In fact, it was over 34,000 more than expected, which is really great news on the income side. You'll see there as well, we have this line that says PPP loan. We did receive a loan from the government. That loan is not considered to be income until it's forgiven, and we anticipate that although that money's in the bank account, it will be forgiven in 2021. Thus, we're going to represent that as income for this year. Against a total budget income of $741,500, we received total income of $776,000 in 2020, which is really good news indeed. Looking ahead to 2021, you can see that our planned giving is considerably lower than it was last year. Well, that's the result of some people not being able to make a commitment this year or not being able to indicate what it is that they hope to give this year. And we understand that, and we've planned accordingly in our budget. You also see that the donations number is lower than it was last year. Donations is incredibly difficult to project. It really does tend to be based a little bit on where people are spiritually and a little bit where they are physically. Are they really here or not? And so this is a very conservative estimate of what we hope to get in 2021. And the plan is simply to do a mid-year budget review in June. Hopefully we'll be able to increase this number, but we wanted to plan on as little as possible and build a budget that was as conservative as possible. Cell tower and investments, you see, has increased a little bit. Our investments actually performed rather well last year, as we'll see in a few moments. And we take a small quote-unquote income from those investments each year. It's not technically speaking income when an asset appreciates, but we have a line at the top of our budget that allows us to withdraw a small amount of appreciation and use that for operations each year. And then finally, the PPP loan, $74,000. The office did a really good job to secure this loan for us. In fact, the application was messed up by the bank, and it looked as though we would not get anything, or we would only get $7,400 because they applied for the wrong sum. We were told numerous times that there was nothing we could do about it. But someone at the bank was able to help us, and the office worked very hard to secure the full amount for us. This gives a total projected budget income of $711,000. It is down a bit, but that is a phenomenal thing when you look at where we are as a country right now. Turning now to the expenses of the church. As you'd expect, clergy salary and expenses were right on budget. Those are fairly static figures. Music, office and education was down a little bit because those categories allow us to bring in extra people or extra materials when we need them, and we were able to make all sorts of savings as a result of the building being closed for much of the year. Buildings and grounds, we did a lot of work in the buildings and grounds last year to make the place suitable for the pandemic with air filtration and with outdoor meeting equipment. We also did a lot of landscaping, opening up the front of the church so that it's more visible from the road. Even so, we were actually able to bring this under budget. We have a more favourable split of our utilities now, and we negotiated some new rates with our utility companies and even suspended some of those services during the lockdown as well, giving us a really healthy reduction in expenses against budget. Inside parish events obviously were down a lot because these are things like picnics and parties that were definitely impacted by the pandemic. As for outside parish costs and taxes, those are pretty much on budget, just down a little tiny bit, as you can see there in that line, giving us against a budget of $741,500, expenses of just $703,700. That is a surplus that is really, really helpful. That reduction of $36,000 together gives us a very healthy surplus of nearly $79,000, which is just really great news. As we look ahead to 2021, you'll see we've made some reductions there in compensation to the staff, and you'll see also we've actually increased music, office and education a tiny bit, just reflecting some of the increased costs from having to gear up and adjust to pandemic life. Buildings and grounds, a little tiny saving compared to last year, shaving as many parts of the budget as possible. This really being reflective particularly of better rates from our utilities and services companies. Inside parish events, that's down because we're still very much restricted in what we can do. This is one of those lines to review at a mid-year budget review if we're open again. And then outside parish costs and tax, fairly similar, just a little bit of a reduction again there. We are at the moment planning to reduce what we give to our diocese initially, and then we have an agreement to review that later in the year once we know where we are. So as a result of all of this, we have made some savings. We did spend less than was budgeted, and we have also made some reductions to expenses for the year ahead, allowing us to present a balanced budget for next year. This is a slide that I absolutely love, the net income budget versus actual slide. You can see back in 2014, that lower bar there, we really were in dire straits, running $140, $150, maybe $1,000 deficit, which was obviously unsustainable. And you can see that each year, that line above it, we've beaten budget every single year, which is really good news. And then once we got to 2017, we started presenting balanced budgets. We don't want to just hoard cash. We do want to be a church that's generous. We want to be a church that grows, and we want to invest in growth. So those balanced budgets are often representative of us doing the most we can with what we have. But each year, because we've grown and because people have grown in maturity, we've actually exceeded income. And because the office staff is so good with what they do, we've actually also been able to underspend each year as well, giving us this little bit of a surplus each year. Now, what we do with that surplus is a couple of things. We have a capital reserve fund, the CRF, you'll hear it described as, and that's for big things, like when a furnace breaks or the roof needs repair or there's substantial work to be done in the grounds. And that really does take some pressure off the operation budget as well. We're also recommending this year that we take the majority of our surplus and we invest it in a new pandemic reserve fund, the PRF. And this is to help us over the next couple of years. If income fluctuates or unusual expenses come in, we'll be able to use the plenty from this year of fat for those lean years that may well be ahead. And we fully intend to spend all of it if we need to, so as not to harm operations. That seems like a wise thing for us to be doing. The big thing to note is, of course, that we've balanced the budget this year because of that PPP loan, and we won't, in all probability, be getting one of those again. And so this pandemic reserve fund is going to be particularly useful for us, maybe actually as we get into 2022, as we look ahead to that year. Now on the next slide, just a few notes about our church assets. So that you know this, with advice, we take a very conservative approach to investing the church finances in mutual funds split between stocks and bonds. We have 60% stock and 40% bonds. And even with that very conservative approach, our investments actually still managed to outperform the market, which is really great news. We also used $64,000 of historic funds to renovate the discipleship house. That's the building used by the youth, Al-Anon and prayer groups and prayer meetings throughout the week. We have an arrangement with our former denomination that has categorized about $100,000 of our investments as what are called historic assets. And our former denomination asserts a trust interest over those funds. But they also have agreed that although we can't spend them on operations, we can certainly spend them on any capital improvements to the property that we would like to make. And so we've taken some of those restricted funds to renovate the DH with new floor, new ceiling, new lighting, new HVAC, new filtration to make it COVID safe, new kitchen and new bathrooms. That's a lot for just a small amount of money, and I'm really pleased that it's nearly finished. Even with that withdrawal, we still have very much the same amount in the investments as we started the year with, which is great news. And as I say, the plan with the 2020 surplus is to reinvest it in a CRF and the new PRF as well. At the end of 2020, our investments totaled $673,271, compared to this time last year, where there was $660,255. So a change there of about $13,000 in our favour. That's balanced between unrestricted funds, those are funds that we can spend on anything we like, of just under $500,000, and restricted funds, those are where the donor or some other body asserts some form of interest over the way it can be used, of $176,000, which is very useful for us as well. Well, that completes an overview of our church finances. In our polity and governance, we don't vote on church budgets. That is, in fact, something that only the vestry is permitted to do. But as always, I do commend the budget to the congregation and seek as much feedback as possible. So if you're watching this and you've been unable to attend the annual meeting, but you have a comment that you'd like to make, feel free please to email me, alex@christchurchfoxchapel.org, or to get in touch through the office and give us any feedback or any questions that you might like to have answered, and we'll be happy to share that information with you. And as I said at the beginning of this little video, if you would like to know far more about the details down to the dollar, then I'd be very pleased to share that with you at any time that you'd like to make an appointment to talk with me or with Nikki, our finance manager, or with Bridget, the operations manager in the office. It's a very important principle to us that we are generous as a church and that we are open and we are honest in all of our financial dealings. And the Lord blesses us when we invest kingdom dollars in a kingdom way for kingdom purposes. So thank you again for listening to this video, and I look forward to seeing you very soon. God bless.